Hello, welcome to Adult Forum. I'm Pastor Hilly. We're calling this episode Stranger Things, and boy, do we have a special guest this week for that. But before I introduce her, a brief reminder that during this time of social distancing, there is wonderful ministry coming out of the community that we call Faith Lutheran Church right here in Columbus, Ohio. Ministry that includes this very podcast. And if you would like to support the ministry of Faith Lutheran financially, please find the link labeled Giving in the description below. But with the introduction out of the way, I am beyond excited about our guest on Adult Forum. Joining me today, she is a professional chef. She's a purveyor of oddities. She's a high school friend of mine. It is Brandy Williamson. Brandy, it's great to see you.
Hi there. Yeah, it's good to see you. It's been a while.
We were just saying, the last time we were probably in the same place at the same time was May of 2000.
Yeah, that blows my mind.
Yeah.
Blows my mind. Where'd the time go? I feel like I'm still like 18 or 20. I think I'm a little bit older now, but in my heart.
No, absolutely. I was thinking about this yesterday. I think the only people from Roxborough who I talk to are you, upon occasion, Ginger. I was on Instagram or something. And then I was in college, so it was somewhere between, and I had a car, so it's between 01 and 04. I was coming off of the interstate. I was coming off of 40 to take the back way into Roxborough, and I stopped to get gas. And I come out of the gas station, and Andy Clements was there.
Oh, wow. Blast from the past.
Yeah. And we just kind of stopped. It was one of those moments that you stop and kind of stare at one another, and you're like,
yeah,
that's who you are. Okay.
Yeah.
You know, pleasantries were exchanged, but that's about it. But that's 21 years. That's a lot of time. Like, the absence of our friendship is old enough to drink.
Exactly. Exactly.
So, how's life been?
It's been great. I've grown up. I went to college. I went to culinary school. I got married. I have a kid. Like,
yeah.
It's nuts.
So you're down in Savannah.
Yeah, I'm in Savannah. That's right.
Now, were you in Atlanta before that, or?
I was running a restaurant in Atlanta, but basically from NC State, I went to Florida for my culinary training, and then I just ended up in Savannah, and I've been here ever since. Nice. But for a bit there, I was traveling back and forth to Atlanta because I had a restaurant there to manage.
Nice. So as a state alum, and my brother's also a state alum, so, go Pack. This weekend is the Krispy Kreme, would have been the Krispy Kreme challenge.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever done that?
No, but I wanted to.
I've done it.
Have you really?
I have. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. So for those who don't know, the Krispy Kreme challenge happens at North Carolina State campus, typically Valentine's Day weekend or the weekend before, and you run 2.5 miles from the heart of NC State campus all the way to a Krispy Kreme. They give you a dozen donuts. You have to eat all 12, run back to where you started in under an hour without throwing up.
And you did it.
Oh yeah. Here's the trick to it. You sprint the first 2.5 miles. They give you the donuts, sit down, put your hands on your head, wait 3.5 minutes for your heart rate to come back down. And then they're Krispy Kremes. So squish them down. So you squish 4 at a time. You end up eating 2.5 and then saunter back to the start line.
That makes sense. Okay.
58 minutes and 30 seconds. But I didn't get ill. I was wearing my GoPro, and I was taking a photo every 10 seconds, and it is a Where's Waldo of vomiting. It is amazing.
Oh, yeah, I don't know if I can do it. I always wanted to try, but
I have no way of validating this story, but that's a big fundraiser for in-state children's hospital and that sort of thing. Yeah. It raises so much money that they wanted to name a new wing on the hospital the Krispy Kreme wing. And parents were getting upset because you can't name a hospital after a donut. Like that's just peculiar marketing.
Great story.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's true.
No, it has to be. And so here's a question that everybody in Ohio wants to know. As I drove in this morning, and it is 34 degrees outside. Mm-hmm. What's Savannah like right now? Is it over 30?
Oh, it's not 34. I think it's in the 50s. if I could check. Oh, it's 60 degrees down here.
Look
It's nice. It's not sunny, if that helps.
Still, I would take that. I would take that.
Yeah.
So, Brandy, one of the many things you do, and actually, just as another aside, one of my favorite things about like our friendship is I feel like I'm your random friend. I feel like about twice a year, I shoot you on Instagram, and I'm like, how do I cook this? What knives should I buy? What does this do? And you're always so gracious with your time. So thank you for that so much.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Happy to help.
But one of the things you also do is your company, is that the right word? Company Odd Savannah,
yep.
Which you deal in, to quote your banner on your sign, or at least the one I saw on Facebook, taxidermy, bones, and murdeorabilia.
That's right. So basically anything odd, anything weird, anything to scare your mother, everything from medical antiques to, like I said, murdeorabilia. And that includes, if you've never heard that term before, it's anything having to do with true crime. So it could be personal items or evidence or artwork, letters, things like that.
Nice. I saw on Instagram you had you've had some, was it Kevorkian paintings?
Yeah, that's that one right there.
Oh, that's it. Yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
And just as this conversation goes, I'll put a link to your Facebook and to your Insta in the description below for anybody who may want to see some of the stuff that we're talking about, or just get a better deal, get a better visual with that. So I think that the first question is, how did you get into that? Like,
yeah, well, it was a bit fluid. Ever since I was little, I've loved bones and guts and gore and horror movies. You know, my dad was a veterinarian in town, so I would assist in surgeries. I would help him dissect things. He had a collection of little jars with kittens and puppies and gallstones and heartworms and all that stuff. I was always fascinated by it. And then fast forward about maybe 7-8 years ago, I was kind of dealing with a bit of postpartum depression. And I was on a road trip with my wife, and we passed this taxidermy museum, and she's like, "Oh, you want to stop?" And I'm like, "No, I just want to go." You know, but she'd be like, "Maybe stop." And I was just looking at all this taxidermy and the bones, and I was like, "This stuff is gorgeous. Like, I love this stuff. Why don't I own any?" So we packed her Prius full of a caribou mount head, 2 wildebeests, and like one other random thing, and brought it home with us. And that was kind of the start of it. And I ended up selling one of those pieces, and just sort of bought more with that. And now I have an entire room full of stuff, and it's a business now. It's what I do.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
It's absolutely. Lord, 2008, I was going to a wedding in Minnesota with the person I was dating at the time, and we had an afternoon to kill, so we go into this like knick-knack shop, and they had a beautifully taxidermied buffalo head. And it was a beautiful day, and I drove a truck. I could put it in the back, and the girl I was dating was like, "If you take that home, you're losing me." Here we are 13 years later. I made the wrong decision, obviously, right? I should have got the buffalo head. Obviously.
Yep.
So in that kind of business, like, who do your customers and clients kind of tend to be? Are they other personal collectors? Are they people who are just into the thing? I think I read on, maybe it was one of your Insta posts, that you've actually like rented things to film crews or production companies, or am I making?
Yeah, so I've sold a lot to film crews, specifically Netflix. When they have little shows, they buy things from me. Now, I never really know what show it's going to be on. I just see, maybe their email address has like film production or Netflix or some like tie to it. But I'd like to start renting to more film crews, especially since Savannah is a really big film hub here. But museums, I've had several pieces in museums, which is really cool. And I'd say most of the time I sell to other collectors.
Mm-hmm.
My stuff tends to be a little bit higher end, I guess. I do have the lower end stuff. Also, what's big right now for me is human teeth. If you think about it, every single dentist has to work on human teeth, and
Right.
where do they get it? I've developed this little niche, and I sell human teeth, and I sell a lot to dental students. And so thousands of dollars a year in, in selling to students. It's cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Did you ever read Mary Roach wrote a great book called Stiff, The Curious Life of the Human Cadaver? Yeah, and the opening chapter about that is the plastic surgery touch-up school where she's observing, and there's all the heads and all the doctors come in.
Yeah, it's really cool. I mean, you know, I highly encourage everyone to donate your body when you're dead. You don't need it anymore. Let students mess with, I'm not going to say mess with it. That doesn't sound right. But study it.
I don't know. I kind of want to fill out the paperwork and be like, please mess with my body, or you to mess with other people, like whatever.
No, you can sign up to be plastinated.
Really?
Like specifically, you can donate it to that fella and be plastinated and put in a bodies museum in some like crazy pose.
You know what? If that's the gift I leave with the world, I feel like I'm doing okay.
You're doing all right.
Man, that's crazy. When you talk about museums and whatnot, I had the opportunity when I was living in Connecticut. I drove up to Portland, Maine, and went to the International Museum of Cryptozoology, which is on Avon Street, which it has no variance on anything. But it's they had a taxidermied Bigfoot, and I'm 6'7", and it had a good 7 inches on me.
Yeah.
And so, again, I have the utmost respect for any animal, cryptozoological or not, that's larger than I am. They had a taxidermy jackalope, they had a Fiji mermaid, and all that kind of stuff. And that was really my first experience in that kind of like cryptozoological world. I don't think I parsed that word correctly. Have you been up to Maine and seen that?
I have not, but I have seen my fair share of Fiji mermaids. I got to say the majority of the people in this world don't necessarily deal with that stuff. There is a small group of people that loves Fiji mermaids and things like that. And I absolutely appreciate the artwork, but I probably would not have one.
Right. Okay.
I like the real things, but those things they're fascinating. I did try to get a Bigfoot taxidermy at one point for a friend of mine. It was for a museum actually. And he now has like the largest collection of Fiji mermaids, I think, in the country.
What?
Yeah.
Your life is just incredibly fascinating to me. And
it's fun. It's fun.
So
fun.
Is there like how much of an overlap is there between like the true crime world and like the cryptozoology world? Like a little bit, not too much. I mean, like they're both fascinating.
I'd say not too much. I mean, if you want to include everything under oddities, then it's all related. But true crime is sort of its own worst enemy over there in the corner.
Okay.
There's a small group of people that collect that stuff. It's ever growing because it's popular. Because I mean, what are you doing now in the pandemic than watching true crime documentaries on Netflix? Okay. So it is becoming more and more popular, but every little thing has its, like, some people collect only taxidermy, some people collect only skulls, only human remains, only murdeorabilia, things like that.
So when you say that like the true crime group is its own worst enemy, like help me unpack that, or unpack that for me.
Well, if I go to a show and I have all my stuff set up on a table, I have a little section that has letters written by Eileen Wuornos, or artwork by some other Richard Ramirez or serial killers or whatnot. And you get people that come up, and half of them are interested. Of that half, maybe half of them have a story to tell you, some sort of connection, like, oh, I grew up 3 houses down from this person. Wow. But then the other 50% is like, they just scoff and walk away. And they don't want anything to do with it. They don't want to touch it. They don't want to look at it. So it's like a love-hate relationship. You either love it or you hate it.
No, I get that. Yeah. Do you think that when people walk through like the oddities trade shows and whatnot, they kind of like oscillate between, I don't know, like a spirit of peculiar historicity and like vicarious observation?
Yeah. No, that definitely makes sense.
I don't know, because I don't know. There's so many like different rabbit holes I want to take this conversation right now, right?
Right.
Because I know that like that's how I felt in the Cryptozoological Museum, right? And again, these things are very different, but it is kind of like when you interact with true crime effects, the same way we interact with any museum, there's that desire to understand historicity of the event, to like, here are these touchstones in history, real people, real things, right?
Absolutely.
And there's that that phrase that's, Churchill wrote it, but he borrowed it from somebody who borrowed it from somebody. If we're unaware of history, we're bound to repeat it, right? So you need to be aware of these sorts of things, and to be aware of things like the treatment of prisoners or the history of psychology, that always kind of tied into that true crime world.
Oh, absolutely. And if you think about it, we have this almost innate fear of clowns. We think white vans are creepy.
Mm-hmm.
Why is this? The fear of clowns. What is it? Coulrophobia.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't really show up in text until like the 1980s. And why is that? Well, 1970s is when John Wayne Gacy, the killer clown, was killing little boys. So it's something to learn from. And yeah, you don't walk alone on the street after dark, and you lock your doors. And don't trust white vans. Don't trust clowns. Right. I apologize to any people who are clowns.
Or have vans.
Yeah. Or have vans. There's probably more people with vans. Sorry, guys.
But it also just points to like us as a bigger society, to be like, nothing ever happens in a vacuum, right? Mm-hmm. And so like that's the thing for I think that if you look at true crime as anthropology, as historicity, and understand it in the context of culture, it helps shine those spotlights in so many other ways.
Yeah.
That if you just want to dismiss it out of hand, you're not doing any benefits to anybody. Did you ever read Alan Watts wrote a really great book? It's called The Book, about facing the taboos of understanding ourselves.
I haven't.
Alan Watts is a English philosopher who is the premise of the book is kind of like this Eastern idea of holistic care, and almost bordering on the lines of pantheism, that all things are created equal in God and existence is what it is. And he keeps making the point that everything we do in relationship to one another, or all movement is relational, right? Like if you have one ball in a vacuum, that ball cannot move because there's no relation to anything else. Mm-hmm. So movement can only happen when you have two, and then it's linear, and then three creates a plane, and this sort of thing. And therefore, when we look at our society and we look at our culture, everything that happens when we walk down the street, or in a bigger picture, everything that happens culturally over the decades is about things interacting with one another. Mm-hmm. Therefore, it's really problematic anytime you try to section off part of that, because you're creating willing blindness in your own psyche.
Yeah.
Which impairs your ability to interact with the world.
I really like that explanation, and I wish I could bring you with me every single time someone says, "Oh, you're such a weirdo," or "Why are you glorifying these people?" I'd be like, "Well, here's my friend, and he would like to explain that to you."
Yes. Let me tell you what the Buddhist would say. Let's take care of this.
Yeah.
It's because everything's relational. I think everything's relational, and it's kind of like when they talk about World War II. Obviously, all the atrocities and the lives that were lost, but then they talk about like the medical discoveries that were found in those concentration camps, obviously by nefarious and horrible means.
Yes.
However, it doesn't happen. And again, like, I hope nobody hears this and goes, "Man, Pastor Healy is justifying the Holocaust." I am not in any way. Yeah, of course. But it's World War II happened and we got the interstate system out of it. Like, thank you, Eisenhower. Like, way to steal it from the Nazis. All right. Uh,
Oh,
whew. I got my all my cheater notes, which I'm very excited by.
yeah, I got
Um,
mine in front of me too.
so one thing that you said, it sounds like there are three kind of groups that you deal with, just in very broad strokes. So you go to the event, you're either talking to other dealers and other sellers and like personal stuff, like interacting in that regard. Potential customers who are interested and at least on board for the ride or to have the conversation, and then people just kind of give you that hard stop.
Yeah.
Yeah, and your day is, but like doing it as long as you have been, I bet you can smell that coming in a lot of ways, right?
Oh, I can tell who a person is as soon as they walk up.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I can tell you if that's a Karen or not. And apologize to any Karens out there. I'm just gonna offend everybody if that's cool.
Especially if you are a Karen who works as a clown who also drives a van, like
you're screwed, man.
we're just coming after you.
Yeah.
After you.
But yeah, I can kind of tell, and you can, I love kids when kids come up to the booth because they're so interested in everything and they don't have that preconceived notion that, oh, this is bad or, oh, this is weird. And they want to touch everything. They want to touch my skulls. They want to put their hands in the teeth and like move them around. And I'm like, yeah, kid, you get it. And then of course the mom's like, no, don't touch it. Like, no, totally cool.
You ever do a thing like when you go to the bank and they give you a sucker as a kid, or you're like, hey, you take a molar with you. Here you go.
Yeah, here you go, kid. There you go. Enjoy it. I've got these little alligator paws. They're about this big. I sell them for like $1, but if kids come up and they're interested in everything and I'm enjoying talking to them and their parents are cool, I'm like, here you go, kid. Here's an alligator paw, and it like totally makes their day.
Nice. Look at that. I appreciate how you just turned into the Santa Claus of the oddity world.
Yeah. Yeah,
Like,
I mean, I've never been called that before, but I'll probably put that on my business card.
You should. You absolutely should. So to spin this kind of reality on its head, when you find yourself as the buyer, what kind of stuff do you gravitate toward?
That's interesting because it's a little bit of everything. Am I looking for something to add to my own collection? Am I looking for something to resell? Am I looking for something for another client? I just kind of look at everything, and if I like it, I buy it if it's reasonably priced.
Right.
One thing that I always buy, and I've said this on many platforms before, is when you see teeth, you buy teeth.
Mhm.
So every estate sale I go to, every antique store I go to, I'm opening up all those little boxes, and you would be surprised like how many people store teeth in little bitty boxes.
Really?
It's bizarre, and hopefully people will start opening them up and enjoying what I enjoy. But that's just something that I've always done, whether it be teeth molds, they take molds of your teeth, or dentures or whatnot. I can't help myself. I always buy teeth.
All right, so let's say you go to Ethel's yard sale, and Ethel has a lot of those little silver boxes, and you open a couple up and find some teeth. Do you just kind of like assess the situation and buy the box and take the teeth with you? Do you kind of put them in your hand and go like, hey, I'll give you $5? Like,
buy the box.
I don't know. I mean, I've lived in a lot of places, and there are some cultures where they wouldn't care, but there are some cultures where I wouldn't want to walk up to a 90-year-old and be like, so I found your dead husband's teeth. Like, how do you feel about that? Like, then you would be the murderer.
Yeah. No, just buy the box.
Just buy the box. No, I get that. Yeah, man. So what was the last thing you saw in your travels that you saw, looked at, and just were like, I'm going home with that?
I bought a full mounted baboon last weekend.
What?
Yeah.
I kind of want to change the title of this episode to I bought a full mounted baboon last weekend.
Yeah.
Because it's such a better hook than Stranger Things. Like
I went to check out a taxidermist. He had a collection, and he's like over 70. He's selling off everything, and he had a bunch of common skulls. And when I say common skulls, I'm talking raccoons, coyotes, roadkill, basically. And those things tend to sell pretty good for me. It shows So I went to go buy a bunch of that stuff, and I walk in and he's got taxidermy just all over the walls. He's an old taxidermist. So he's got probably 100, 150 pieces on the wall. And I'm poking around and I'm like, I see this baboon and I'm like, you know what? I think that would fit in the back of my car. So I'm just like, hey, how much? He gives me a good price. And I'm like, let's take it home. So I got that, and I'm working out maybe getting the rest of his collection. Fingers crossed.
Nice.
Yeah.
So as you say that, I'm reminded of Instagram pictures. You go all out for Halloween.
Oh yeah, we love Halloween. Yeah.
Outside decorations, yada, yada, yada. And I almost think about, like episodes of Modern Family and whatnot, when the dump is like, not only do the outside of the house, but they also let kids walk through. Do you ever do that? Do you just like do a 100% house conversion thing?
Our house is pretty much always Halloween. Our welcome sign at the front door is a coffin-shaped welcome sign. And just inside, I mean, I've got skulls everywhere, and we tend to keep up Halloween stuff all year.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
This is just a side note. A couple months ago, I went on a tear where I was reading a bunch of memoirs by crematory owners and funeral homes, and like Smoke Gets in Your Eyes and all that sort of thing. Have you like? I noticed when I mentioned Mary Roach, you're like, oh yeah, I totally checked that one off the list.
Yeah. Mary Roach is an awesome author, and I've read Smoke Gets in Your Eyes, and all so interesting and taboo as well, I guess.
Yeah, but there's an amazing book titled 199 Cemeteries to Visit Before You Die.
Oh, check that out.
It's broken into sections around our country and around the world. Totally worth your time. Like, I got mine in the mail probably a year ago, and the first thing I did is there are three cemeteries in the book in Ohio. I just took a day. I was like, I'm going to go hang out at graveyards all day.
Yeah.
Because why not? And, hit a graveyard, find a brewery. That's a fun day. That
sounds great. That sounds like a date.
Other books you may be interested in. I swear I'll get us back on course here.
Yeah.
About 3 years ago, New York Times published a book, and it's 1,000 obituaries of people of note in the history of the New York Times.
That sounds like fun.
It's a coffee table book. I mean, it's solid, like yay big, and it's broken into musicians, political leaders, doctors, world leaders, and it comes with a thumb drive. And the thumb drive has an extra 5,000 obituaries of just New York citizens who lived crazy lives that you've never heard of.
That's so cool.
Oh, it's called Book of the Dead. That's the name of it. New York Times Book of the Dead.
Okay.
Totally worth a gander. Totally worth it.
Yeah, I'll check that out.
All right. So last book, and this gets us back on part. Did you ever read The Monster Show by David Scull?
I haven't, but I have looked into it. I know what it's about.
Yeah. Amazing book. Just for anybody who hasn't read it, one of the premises, it's the history of the horror genre from the traveling carnival days all the way up to the year 2000, because it was printed in 99 or so. One of his theses in the book is that horror movies work on two different levels. There's your primary scare agent, and then there's culturally why it's actually scary.
Mm-hmm.
So Nightmare on Elm Street. Freddy Krueger is obviously scary. It's 1982. The AIDS epidemic is breaking over the world. High school kids are sleeping together. They're dying in their sleep, and their parents can't save them.
Mm-hmm.
This is kind of how these things work. Bela Lugosi is Dracula. Dracula is scary. Independently wealthy Eastern European are killing women at night, and nobody can get a hold of them.
Yeah.
Paranormal activity. There's a ghost. If you're in a relationship, your partner's baggage will slowly kill you, right? Like, this is kind of how it all breaks down, right? And the reason that I kind of bring this up, is that, and this goes back to how people interact with, especially true crime memorabilia. I think that some people look at that all as fact. And some people look at that as fiction because they can't handle that reality.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just curious, especially in light of the fact that we are literally living in a pandemic at the moment. Have you seen that change the interaction to that standoffish portion, either in a more open conversation way to understand especially medical tools, or is that wall even higher that like, no, I live this, I don't want to deal with this?
What I've seen is more interest in plague related items, if that's kind of what you're asking.
Yeah.
The typical plague doctor mask with the beak and all that, people really want that right now.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, that's one of the items that, to find a genuine one is, your chances are 0.001% of finding an actual one. They just didn't survive, or they got lost, maybe, I don't know, they got thrown away. They just, you can't find them. So most of the ones that you're going to find these days are reproductions, which is still cool. They're still cool masks. Yeah. Another thing is, people are a bit more conservative in what they're buying these days. They're not frivolous. They're not just going to buy any random piece. They're careful. I think I probably just went off on a tangent with you, but yeah, kind of art imitating life imitating art sort of thing is what you're getting at. Yeah.
Yeah. And what's fascinating is to hear you say that people weren't or are not spending as frivolously. Because I like, ever since high school, I've been playing Magic the Gathering. Still do it, still love the game. And with every stimulus check that comes out, like the baselines of cards on like resale markets keep going up. Because there's a bunch of stupid card players who are like, cool, I just got government money. Let me go spend $1,500 on Magic cards, which I'm not going to tell anybody how to spend their money. But
that is interesting. There is some market that has gone up tremendously. And there's one collector in my group, and he collects Pokemon cards.
Yep.
And there was like one Pokemon card that was selling for like $35,000 for one card.
Yep.
Unfortunately, that's just not my business.
Oh, right.
I wish it was.
I had a card in my collection in the past 3 weeks jump from $90 to $700. And it's just because like people are taking stimulus, and I don't know, maybe Magic players are just bad with money, and they're like, I'm just going to give all my money to eBay. But again, I'll sit this out because like I'm not hurting on that end. You know what I mean? Yeah.
You're right though. I have seen different genres, I guess, go a little crazy. But like I said, on my end, the stuff that I collect, no, people are very much particular about what they're looking for.
So let's talk about the plague mask for a second. Like when you're, because they date back 18th, 19th century, right? 17th, 18th, 19th century. Original construction, were they leather?
I believe they were leather, or maybe a heavy canvas. But from what I can remember in my studies, leather and the long beak, and they would have aromatics at the end of the beak because they thought that breathing in the air was what caused the plague, which, okay, sure. But they thought that having the aromatics there and the flowers and whatnot would prevent that.
Huh.
Yeah, and just to cover up the smell in general.
Oh, yeah. So I wonder about like other medical tools of the same time period. You know what I mean? I don't know. Leather. I don't know. I've been to enough museums in Romania where, obviously leather is going to hold up over 300 years, right? Mm-hmm. But no, it's this thing about like, when we talk about like other antiques or historical medical tools, or is it that, we're in a pandemic, they're from a pandemic, and that is the most well-known feature. So that's what the public attention is, just like, that's the thing.
Yeah, that's the thing. Because when you think of a plague, that's immediately what people think of, is that old doctor's plague mask. Yeah.
So that being said, as you collect like other medical artifacts, like, I don't know, do you have those moments where you stop and look at it and you're like, wow, we as a culture have really come a long way. Like, this is...
Yeah, I'm just thankful I didn't live in that time to have to deal with that, because it's horrifying. I mean, thinking about it, that doctors didn't really, it wasn't a wide practice to wash your hands until what, like the 1870s?
Yep.
Like, I mean, just thinking about the tools that they would use. Now, I know stainless steel came along a little bit earlier than that. Before that, they would kind of use ebony handles or wooden handle things. And it just doesn't get clean like it should, of course, if they were cleaning it at all. So, the mortality rate, if you got a little infection, was horrible. Yeah. So I'm pretty thankful to not have to deal with that.
Absolutely. I read somewhere that there's only a handful of people in America that still use an iron lung. And by a handful, I mean like 5 or under.
Yeah.
And it's to the point where none of the companies that made the iron lung are still up and operational.
Yeah.
So if anything breaks, it's this really like, holy cow moment, because you're like, we're either going to have to retrograde or retrofit some crazy modern stuff to keep it working.
Yeah.
Or that's just not going to go well.
Yeah. Or you're just out of luck, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's scary.
I mean, that being said, let's get deep and let's get philosophical for a moment. What do you think? What do you think we as culture can learn from looking backwards at like medical history, especially through these artifacts?
I think just understanding how science works and understanding that you have to research and you have to test, and from there you can just keep learning. Science. They say science is kind of the end all be all. That's the answer. But the more you test, the more you experiment, you can correct that and you can find a new answer. Yeah. And so just, kind of trust in that, and, trust vaccines.
Yeah.
I don't know. Wear a mask.
Let us trust vaccines. I feel like
do that.
On what day is it? February 5th, 2021.
Yeah.
Trust vaccine is like a good thing that we should promote at all times.
Yeah. Also, the earth is round.
Yes.
I don't know. I don't know why we have to keep going back to this, but whatever.
I was talking to a friend the other day, and they were talking about like aromatherapy and scents and stuff and all this kind of thing. I was like, whatever, like people, you do you, you know what I mean? Like, I'm sure lavender, like, our smell is one of the most powerful senses, and it'll trigger something in the brain and yada, yada, yada. But they just kept going on about like, oh, well, lavender will help you relax. Lavender will do this. This is scientifically proven. And I smile and nod as much as I can. I'm like, I'm really glad it works for you. And she's like, no. This works for everybody. I was like, yeah. And why do you believe that? And they go, oh, well, they believed this for thousands of years in the East. And I'm like, thousands of years ago, they also believed the earth was flat. Thus,
yeah,
like, I'm glad it works. But there's other like empirical evidence here.
Yeah, I mean, that's the placebo effect at work, right?
Yep.
Like you think it's going to work, it works. I got to be careful what I say, because there's family members that believe the same thing, so I need to be a little careful. But I'll admit, if I'm running a bath, a nice little lavender oil, it's nice. The scent is pleasant. Do I think it's going to cure cancer? No. Will I trust that? No. But to each his own, man. Who am I to judge? I don't care. You do you.
Exactly. I was reading, I forgot what I was reading the other day, but the author made the point that sometimes we believe things because we believe that we believe them.
Yeah.
Which reminds me, a good buddy of mine always says that, like, you can't rationally talk somebody out of a point that ration didn't get them to in the front end.
Yes.
Which I think is a really valid, and I think about those two things in conversation with one another, and I'm like, yeah, that all works.
You can't argue with stupid.
That's true.
I should have said that. But that's what it boils down to. I mean, all of Facebook right now is nothing but arguments, and it's like you're not going to get anywhere.
Right.
with anyone right now, I don't think.
Yeah.
But we'll prevail one day, hopefully.
One day. All right. Brandy, last question. What is the favorite thing you own in your personal collection?
I was trying to think about that because that's the inevitable question that I get. And I have two pieces to show you. Well, one, here's a skull. You'd like to see one of the ones I own. This is one of maybe 20. Pretty cool. I don't know if you've ever held a human skull or not. They're pretty awesome. But this piece right here, it's a bracelet. It's a cuff. But the leather on the inside is actually tanned human leather.
Really?
Yeah. And this is probably something that you wouldn't even recognize in my collection. If it was just sitting on a shelf, you'd just be like, oh, she left her bracelet here. But yeah, tanned human leather. Pretty cool.
And so where did that come from? Like, what's the backstory?
It was a cadaver. Now, the backstory, I don't know how this artist got it. I don't know. But human cadaver, donated body to science. It was a male, I believe, 65 years old, died of a heart attack. I only know that because I have a little bit of his fat in a jar as well. And I know that the skin came off of his butt. So that's all I know about that. And the artist was toying around with tanning methods, which is really hard after a body's been embalmed because the skin gets a little, I'll say waxy. Okay. But it's not like tanning, fresh hides or whatever. So he wasn't really happy with how the tan came out. He was going to bind a book, I believe. So instead, he decided to cut it smaller and do things like jewelry. But I'd say that's probably one of the coolest pieces that I own. Most recently, I just got this in the mail today. I don't know if you can see it, but it's Jack Kevorkian's business card.
That's awesome.
I still need to do a little research. I'm hoping that it's legit. And that's a lot of what I do is if it's an auction or something, I bid and I try to get something and then it comes in and maybe I was bidding on this skull and it's fake. Maybe this card is a reproduction. I don't know, but it's a lot of research. And that's really cool about what I do is I get to research a lot of stuff. I get to learn a lot of things. I get to learn about, I've learned so much about anatomy, history, life and death. When I was little, I was terrified of dying. Mm-hmm. I guess that's kind of an innate fear. No, innate fears are loud noises and falling. But I guess it's a fear that we develop as we get older. Stemming from like the first time that I had to go to a wake and see a dead body, which, as you know, is quite popular in the South. Everybody loves to look at dead bodies.
Yeah.
So I think I was maybe 7 or 8 the first time that I saw one, and it scared the crap out of me. Huh. And ever since then, just like I start talking about it, like my heart's racing, like I'm just afraid of dying. But doing this, I literally like look death in the eye and it's like, okay, we're nothing but a bunch of bones and blood in a skin bag, right? Yeah. So, which I think possibly goes against everything that maybe you and the church teaches. But it helps me. It helps me realize like that's all we are. And when you're done, when you're gone, you're done. And I've come to terms with that, and it's much easier now. It helps me cope, I guess, coping mechanism.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So as you say that, like I have 2 questions. One is thinking about the gentleman who you have his butt fat or his butt on your bracelet and his fat in a jar.
Yeah.
When you think about the things that you've researched about the individual items, what's been like the coolest backstory or the first backstory that comes to mind of like, all right, this may not be the craziest piece, but like, oh man, I learned about this backstory or this person or this animal. And
yeah. You know what? I have, it's in the line of murdeorabilia, and it's this homemade knife, and it's heavy. It weighs like 3 pounds. It's gigantic. And I got it from a gentleman who had been visiting me at shows recently, and he said that his daughter used to date this guy who ended up being charged with murder, stabbing and killing someone. And this was like a local case, like
Right.
in Georgia and South Carolina. And he told me the whole backstory, and he was like, I was helping him clean up the yard. You know, my daughter was going to move in with him. And I found this knife, and he gave it to me. And then come to find out the guy killed somebody, and he's like, but he gave me this knife.
Yeah.
And it's like, wow, I have like the whole backstory of this. But also I can go like with human stuff, I don't really know where they come from. You know, they're all donated. So you don't know. I don't collect anything that's not medical, really.
Yeah.
But a lot of animal skulls that I have, like I just got in a horse skull, and the taxidermist told me that it was a young horse and it stepped in a gopher hole and broke its leg, so it had to be put down. You know, so like, I don't know, maybe I just give a little bit more respect to that skull. I don't think respect's the right word. I think we respect the dead too much. We should respect the living, but that's a whole nother thing. But a lot of the animal skulls, I know where they come from, whether it's a zoo or a pet or whatever. Yeah.
As you said that, it reminded me, seminal 80s, 90s punk band Bad Religion.
Mm-hmm.
It was on the last record. I can't remember the name of it. It's the one that has like the head of Caesar in the passenger seat of the car, that one. There's this great line where Greg Graffin, who I love to death for the record, like, oh, Greg. But the line is, the character is talking to the postman, and he goes, how should we bury our dead? And I don't think they care all that much, the postman said, right? Because there's this guy looking at this truth of like, how do we understand the dead and how do we reverence the truth? And this kid is asking those in any position of authority. And he asked the post guy.
Yeah.
And the post guy's like, I'm pretty sure they don't care. I'm pretty sure they don't care. And it's funny you said Southern culture, absolutely. A lot more open casket, not only wakes or viewings or calling hours or whatever you want to call it. Mm-hmm. But also, and this is Southern and Midwestern, open caskets during the funerals themselves, which I hadn't seen in 10 years. Like, that's not a New England thing.
Yeah.
I remember I came back, I've been back in Columbus I moved out here in May of 2019. And I did a funeral, first funeral I did was at a funeral home. And I go in, and they wheel the casket into the little chapel room, and they opened it up for the funeral. And then, like, as an orator, I'm like, who am I talking to here? Like, do I look at the crowd, or like,
yeah.
I don't like the fact that, Ethel is sitting here behind me, kind of staring over my shoulder.
Funerals are just so weird. I've never liked them. I mean, obviously, I know it's more for the living.
Yeah.
Than for the dead. It's just, like I said, I just feel like we respect dead people more than we respect living people.
Well, it's easier to respect somebody when you don't actually have to deal with them. Like.
Yeah, you said it, man.
It's a friend of mine used to say, like, everybody's grandparents are great after they're dead.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. One of the things I think is just, this is a daily part of my life, since COVID, so typically or historically in America, you would have the wake or the viewing or the calling hours or the visitation, whatever synonym you want to use. And the funeral, whether in the funeral home or in the church, would be 200 people or whatever, and the big to-do. Mm-hmm. And then the graveside is 10 people under the tarp in the graveyard.
Right.
With COVID and social distancing and all that sort of thing, within 3 weeks, that dynamic was flipped on its head, because funeral homes and churches could only allow 10 to 12 people based on social distancing.
Right.
You go out to the cemetery, and it's outdoors, and you can be in your car, and suddenly you end up with 30, 40, 50, 60 people at the graveside. Mm-hmm. So we're seeing these actual cultural touchstones of mourning being flipped on their head. And then suddenly every cemetery owner and every funeral home in America now needs to buy a mobile PA system, a sound engineer, and all this sort of thing, because you're getting these crowds of people at cemeteries.
Yeah.
And, you know, like the funeral worship order is written to happen in a church where there's musicians and all this kind of stuff. So like even church organizations was like, how do we reinvent the wheel? Because this whole culture is flipping over in just crazy, crazy ways. Yeah, but you're right. It's at the end of the day, it comes down to the living and how do we mourn and how do we do that? And, you know, everybody's experience on that's different. You know, some people kind of get stuck in that rut and can't get over it. And I think that psychologically, that's a lot of, at least in white culture, like in white middle class culture, it's helping people kind of get over that hump and let them know they're not alone, because it's a very different reality than like African-American churches that I've served in Chicago, where the funeral is the homegoing and it's going to be 2 hours and there's going to be a band and there's going to be the best cookout you've ever had at the back end of that. You know what I mean? I don't know. Like, yeah, I've spent the last 15 years like researching the history of our understanding of the afterlife across Western thought and like funeral customs. So again, like you and I could do like another 2 hours on just like, why are funerals weird?
Yeah.
I can knock that one out. Hey, but as we wind down, I got to ask, how's the wife? How's the daughter? How old?
Everybody, I'm sorry, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. No worries. How's the wife? How's the daughter? How old is she now? She's
2.5.
2.5?
Not the wife, the daughter. The daughter's 2.5. We're good. You know, my wife is an archaeologist, so she's got that whole anthropological background. I heard she hasn't seen a dip in her work since COVID, which is great. You know, or maybe you don't know, I actually quit my job with the restaurants in December of 2019. So I was starting a business right at the start of COVID. Not the best time to start a business.
Yeah.
But it's turned out to be pretty good. And then of course I'm also a private chef. So people now, they want to get out, they want to do things, they want to have friends over, they don't want to go to restaurants. So they hire me to come in. So that's working out really well. My daughter, Beowulf, she's awesome. She's smart. She's beautiful. Best thing that's ever happened to me. Yeah, just love it. Loving life. I'm a homebody, so like this is totally cool for me. Being home with the family all the time. When you think about it, for the past 10 decade plus of working in restaurants, you know, I was rarely home. 2 days off, maybe 1 day off. Working until 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning and coming home. It got really bad towards the end. I ran 4 restaurants. I don't know if you knew.
No.
4 of them, 3 in Savannah and 1 in Atlanta. So I was working literally all the time. Even on my days off, I had my phone right here constantly answering emails, answering calls. And it just got to be where I wasn't spending time with my family. When it boils down to it, like, you know, I can get money other ways. I don't need to, that sounded bad. I can get money. I can make money by selling oddities and by being a personal chef. I don't like doing this. I need to be spending more time with my family.
Right.
Because I mean, ever since I remember being in high school and like going off to college and thinking, man, I just want to be a mom, you know? So now I am, and I want to enjoy that time. I want to take that time.
I mean, because it comes down to like, you know, we work so hard, but to what end?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
You're just going to end up on my shelf.
Exactly. Or posed oddly in a museum somewhere.
Yeah, there you go. That's it.
Yeah. Well, Brandy Williamson, thank you so much for your time. We need to connect again before 21 years pass.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Or, you know what we should do? We should, wait, because Ginger is still in North Carolina.
Yeah, she's in Raleigh.
Okay. I realize that I am the only one of the 3 of us who do not have a family or kids, but as somebody who, you knew me in high school, I was a very like awkward, shy kid. I grew out of that, thankfully, learned how to talk and carry myself as a person. But it would be like, I don't know, it would be hilarious for the 3 of us to find somewhere to have a beverage in Roxborough.
Oh my God, in Roxborough? Jesus. Okay.
I know that. Because I no. Like I would sit there, kind of scratch my head, look around, and go, "All right, that don't need to come back here for another 20 years."
Yeah, I'm good. All right. Yeah, we should totally do that. I'm sure we can. Ginger and I can get away from the kiddos and
Nice.
go hang out. Yeah, that'd be fun.
Nice. Well, hey, again, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it so much, Brandy. You're amazing. Good luck with everything that you're doing, from personal chefing. Is that a verb now? Personal chefing.
It is now.
To Odd Savannah. Again, I'll put the Facebook link to Odd Savannah in the description below, and so people can see more of the stuff you're doing. And again, I hope you and the family have a great day. And again, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.